And it appears we are recording. Thank you, Rhiannon. I just want to let everyone that is on the line know that we will be recording this webinar today so that you can also view it at a later date, or for those who are not able to attend can view it as well. Welcome to today's webinar. It is just for Iowa State Workforce Development Board members and key folks engaged with the board. We are going to be talking today about the system transformation and realignment. This is intended to be an information session, which will be followed up by an in-person training, and we'll provide more information about that as we go forward. I'm trying to advance my slide. Here we go. All right, let me introduce myself, and then I'm going to have the other presenters introduce themselves as well. My name is Lynn Bajorek. I am a program manager with Mayor and Mayor. For those of you who are not familiar with us, Mayor and Mayor is a talent development and change management firm. We like to say that we operate at the nexus of workforce development, economic development, and education. So we do a lot of consulting and technical assistance support around the country on a variety of projects related to workforce and economic development. Many like this one that's focused on helping build the capacity of state and local workforce boards. I have been working with Mayor and Mayor now for about 7 years. Prior to that, I worked for the Michigan Works Association, which is a partnership between the state and local workforce system in Michigan. And then prior to that, I was with the U.S. Department of Labor as a federal project officer. And my role in this project is to help lead and keep organized our ongoing project with the Iowa Workforce Development Department to help you all move forward with this system transformation effort. Let me turn it over now to Lori Collins, my colleague, so that she can introduce herself.
Hello, good morning. My name is Lori Collins, and I'm a senior consultant with Mayor and Mayor. I have over 25 years experience in the public workforce system, serving both as a local workforce area director and also as a state administrator in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. Most recently, I served with a large nonprofit known for its work within the workforce system, and specifically with targeted populations such as individuals with disabilities. For this project, I'm serving as a subject matter expert for Iowa, and hope that the experience I've had with the workforce system in other states can help with this transformation effort.
Great, thank you, Lori. And Stacy O'Keefe, who is with the U.S. Department of Labor's Region 5 and is also serving as a close partner in this transformation effort. Go ahead, Stacy.
Hi, everyone. This is Stacy O'Keefe. As Lynn said, I am with the Department of Labor's Training Administration. And I am a supervisor over the division that oversees WIOA programs and Wagner-Pizer programs. So my team conducts oversight in the states and local systems.
All right, thank you, Stacy. Just so you know, Stacy, it sounds like there may be a little bit of a connectivity issue. It was a little harder to hear you this time than when we tested it. So we'll let you know when we come to your slides if we think we may need to have you dial in instead, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I just want to let you know before we move forward about this webinar platform that we're using. It is a Zoom platform. Some of you have probably used this before. There is a chat box in the lower right-hand corner. We would love to have you use this feature to introduce yourself. Go ahead and tell us who you are and what the organization is that you represent on the state board. And then also to pose any questions throughout the webinar. So as we're presenting out information, please don't hesitate to go ahead and type type away in that chat box if questions come up. We have designated intervals throughout the webinar where we'll pause and we can respond to those questions. So please don't hesitate. That is part of what this is all about, and the training that we're going to do face-to-face with you next month, well, I guess it's early October, is to engage with you and hear directly about what your questions and concerns are and how we can help the team in Iowa address them. So please go ahead and fill that chat feature in. Let us know who you are and the organization you represent. And while you're doing that, I'm going to go ahead and move us forward. We were really happy and pleased to get a recorded message from Governor Reynolds and asked us to relay to you that she is grateful for your commitment, both to attending the webinar today and also for the role that you play in the workforce development system in Iowa. So she's provided some brief comments that we want to serve as the foundation for this webinar today and our work going forward. So I'm going to go ahead and play that for you now.
Thank you for serving on the State Workforce Development Board. Whether you're a chief elected official or a board member, you're a critical voice in how Iowa's workforce system operates and supports local communities. As the entity charged with setting the vision for the workforce system in Iowa, this board convenes state, regional, and local partners to ensure Iowa is in compliance with the Federal Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, which allows funding to continue flowing to serve Iowans. This webinar and the face-to-face training to follow will provide information essential to understanding your considerable roles and responsibilities under the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. The webinar also features information about transformation and local workforce development area realignment process, timeline for implementation, and upcoming training to support the role of the State Workforce Development Board. So thank you for being a part of our efforts to upskill, reskill, and grow our workforce. Together, we're investing in Iowans and their future.
All right. Well, thank you again to Governor Reynolds for that message and for the team in Iowa for getting us this recording. We felt it was important that you hear directly from her. As a governor-appointed board, we know that she really establishes the foundation for the vision and the message that you all then work further to refine. So we are grateful to have her support and her commitment to the system transformation effort. Let me talk a little bit about the objectives for this webinar today. There are really three key things that we want to accomplish. We want to help you gain an understanding of what this system transformation effort is all about, how it came about, why, and what those steps to transform will all entail. We want to explore your role as a State Workforce Development Board in WIOA, and then also how you can help move the system transformation forward. And then we want to identify those key next steps. There's several steps that will take place, and we'll talk a little bit about that, but there's some key next steps for you as the state board to help support that transformation going forward. In our agenda, first, we'll talk about that transformation effort. Integral to that is understanding the value proposition of WIOA. And so we want to give you an overview of the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act so that we all have a baseline understanding. And I know that many of you are already going to know some of these things, but we thought it was important to start there with step one. Then we'll talk about the Iowa Challenge. So why are we bringing this transformation forward in Iowa now? And Stacy's going to help lay that out for us so that everyone has a good, clear understanding. And then we'll talk about the steps for the transformation and those key next steps that I just mentioned. Okay. Before we do that, we know, and we hear this from workforce boards around the country, that it can be so frustrating, right, to hear the alphabet soup. Unfortunately, most government programs, and WIOA is no exception, employs a lot of acronyms, which can be very confusing for folks. Our goal is to use as few acronyms as possible when we're presenting, but we find we just can't avoid it sometimes, can't seem to help ourselves. So we thought it would be a good idea to start with defining some of these up front. And just so you all know, you're going to have these slides. They're going to be posted on a landing page, which is coming soon, with all the other key information. And then I believe the plan is to email the PowerPoint out you know, in the next few days, along with an evaluation of the webinar. So you will have all of this to refer back to. Okay, so let me just walk through these key acronyms. You've already heard me use the term WIOA. That stands for the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. Over the next several months, you're going to hear a lot about CEOs and CLEOs, or CEOs and CLEOs, sometimes we say. The CEO is the chief elected official, and we'll define that further in the training that comes up. The CLEO is the chief lead elected official. Both those groups have distinct roles under WIOA. The SWDB is all of you. That's the State Workforce Development Board. The LWDB, those are local workforce development boards. LWDA, the local workforce development area or local area. So it's essentially the area that is covered or overseen by a local workforce development board. And finally, IWD, which is Iowa Workforce Development, which plays a key leadership role in implementing WIOA. All right, so let's start with the facts. Told you we were going to explain the system transformation, and we were going to start by talking about WIOA and overall the goal that it has for states and communities around the country. So this board, I'm sure like most boards across the country, likely shares a vision for economic prosperity in Iowa. And that vision would include keeping and growing the existing businesses that you have, as well as attracting new industry sectors. So to achieve that vision, it's critical that communities offer a workforce with the right skills and abilities to meet the needs of the employers, right, in the key industries in that community. So simply put, workforce development is economic development. It supports family-sustaining wages and career opportunities for people across your state, and it supports the quality of place that many are working to achieve. And I imagine as business people, as civic leaders, those are things that probably come up in your work all the time. And I want to talk with you a little bit about how WIOA is designed as a tool to help you achieve those things. Let's talk a little bit about Iowa Works. Iowa Works, which I'm sure you're all familiar with Iowa Works, it's the public workforce system. And it's actually essential to achieving that vision we just talked about. It's the network of federally funded programs that are focused on employment and training services. And it's a primary tool to develop the talent pipeline. And that's a term that you're going to hear going forward, certainly at our face-to-face training. It's that pipeline of talent that you need in Iowa to grow your economy and ultimately drive prosperity. So the Iowa Works system is governed by the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, or WIOA. Both WIOA and the public system it governs are essential tools to achieving the vision we just described. It demands the alignment of partners and resources around key industry sectors. And WIOA seeks to transform the public workforce system into that talent pipeline developer, which offers businesses the workforce they need and workers opportunities to advance along a career pathway. Again, career pathway is another term you're going to hear a lot more about as we move forward. WIOA was enacted just about 5 years ago, a little over 5 years ago, July 2014. At its sole, I would say, foundational purpose is designed to help job seekers access employment, education, training, and support services, and to match employers with those skilled workers that they need to compete. Congress passed the act by a wide bipartisan majority, and it's the first legislative reform in 15 years of the public workforce system. It outlines the vision, goals, objectives, and requirements for how that public workforce system, including Iowa Works here in Iowa, is structured and operates and brings together in strategic coordination the core programs of federal investment in skill development. And I'm sure through your work on the state board, you've heard about the core programs. You've heard about WIOA, Wagner-Pizer, vocational rehabilitation, adult education, all these terms thrown around, right, that cover core programs. And as we move forward with training, we're going to explain to you what those programs do and how they really should be aligned to achieve things like career pathways or the ultimate goals that are in WIOA. Okay. WIOA has 5 key principles upon which the public workforce system should lie. And we did our best here in this slide to lay out these 5 key principles, and I'm going to talk through each one just a little bit. And again, we'll dig deeper here when we have our training around what these key principles are. But these are the ideas or the concepts that should underlie the work that you do at the state board, instilling a vision and oversight, and the work that happens locally when they're actually designing and delivering services. The first is integrated service delivery. So all programs within the system are to work collaboratively to serve those 2 customers, right? The 2 customers being the business community and individual job seekers. So the programs that provide those services are considered partner programs, those programs that I just listed off at the top of my head. The idea here is that the programs do not duplicate each other, but instead they should work collaboratively to deliver the best outcome for the customer. So it's not about having a handful of siloed programs, but having these programs collaborate and to provide wraparound services and integrated services with the various things that they have to offer. The second key principle is a focus on strategy. This element is critical at the local board level. The local board should be focused on the big picture of workforce development and strategies to ensure that the supply side, or the workforce system, meets the needs of the demand side, which is the business community. So there is also strategy involved at the state board level as well, but those executors really happen down at the local level where they're saying, okay, I've got this overarching guidance from my state board. How am I going to develop a local strategy to implement their vision? The third key principle is regional economic development. So meeting workforce needs is critical to economic growth, as we've already stated. State and local boards, in partnership with workforce, economic development, education, all those other social service organizations, the regional, local levels, they all align education and training investments to regional, civic, and economic growth strategies. So the goal is to ensure that all job seekers and businesses can access those pathways or the talent pipeline that leads to prosperity. High quality services. So the system must be focused on high quality services. To do this, stakeholders have to increase their coordination of programs, their braiding of resources, so that they're supporting a comprehensive system that's customer focused, right? Focused on the needs of the customer and how they can access seamless and integrated services that are accessible for all. And finally, high quality services goes right along with an evaluative process to determine service excellence. So the final key principle is creating systems of accountability and transparency. By analyzing data, evaluating performance standards. It means making purposeful decisions about the system and how it will operate, as well as operating within open meeting laws and procuring service providers, and following all of those requirements and key provisions that are embedded in the law. I know that's a lot of conceptual stuff to digest in a webinar, so do just want to remind folks that we'll dig in a little deeper when we have the face-to-face training. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the WIOA hallmarks of excellence. As I said before, WIOA envisions a workforce system that's quality-focused, employer-driven, customer-centered, and tailored to meet the needs of regional economies. It's a vision of collaboration and customer focus, with businesses driving the system's agenda and the range of services that are provided. So to sum all that up into, I guess what we might say are 3 pithy statements that are easy to follow and remember, we have designed in collaboration with Department of Labor 3 hallmarks of excellence. The first is that business and job seekers drive workforce solutions. So this should be underlying everything that happens in the Iowa work system. Excellent customer service and a focus on continuous improvement. That should just go without saying. Again, as services are designed and delivered, the customer is at the center, and there's a formal process to continually evaluate the work that's being done and if it's succeeding, as well as figuring out ways to continuously improve it where it's not. And finally, strong regional economies and boards that are active in community and workforce development. So not boards that are simply signing off on things or being fed information and asked to approve or vote yay or nay, but boards are actually driving the vision and the decisions that are being made. Okay, so hopefully what we've gotten across up to now is that WIOA is more than a program. It's a system, and it's composed of various elements from workforce development, education, and economic development. And those 3 entities, they share overlapping goals. And when they're guided by state and local boards that ensure that all those elements are working to achieve those same goals, then you have the foundation for vibrant regional economies where businesses thrive and people want to live and work. So meeting workforce needs is therefore critical to economic growth. All right, well, I know that, again, all of that was a lot of discussion around concepts and principles. I want to give you something really concrete here in this slide, and that is what you see here, obviously, is an org chart, essentially, of the public workforce system. And I just want to walk through these key players to give you kind of a baseline understanding. Again, we're going to talk more about this at the training, but each of the entities in this chart has a role in implementing WIOA. So let's start with USDOL, which stands for the U.S. Department of Labor. The federal funding for WIOA comes to each state through the United States Department of Labor. And in turn, as Stacy said in her introduction, DOL, or Department of Labor, I'm sorry, it is a terrible habit, has compliance and oversight requirements with all the states, as well as a requirement to provide technical assistance, which is what she is essentially doing on this webinar today. And this is why in the past, you've probably heard mention of monitoring trips, reviews, and reports from the United States Department of Labor in Iowa. That work occurs in every state around the country. The arrow pointing down from the U.S. Department of Labor goes to the governor. The governor receives that federal funding, and it is housed administratively in the state workforce agency. For Iowa, this is the Iowa Workforce Development Department, or IWD. The governor, using criteria spelled out in the law, appoints all of you, the State Workforce Development Board. And I know you'll see in this chart arrows pointing back to state agencies, down to local workforce boards. We see lots of arrows here, and that is to show the interconnectedness between all of these different partners and stakeholders that essentially work together to ensure effective oversight and implementation of WIOA. Again, we don't have time today, and nor is a virtual environment the ideal way to present that information, but we will dig in further when we're together in person. The state agency, or IWD in this case, has oversight for the administrative functions of the state and the local system. And as a result, they have oversight for the role of the chief elected officials in the local system, Do want you to know that that is a very important group to implementing WIOA. We are having a separate webinar for chief elected officials, where we'll also cover much of the same material, and we'll be providing training out to all of them regarding the many significant roles and responsibilities they have under WIOA, and we will talk about that more in the training that we have with you. CEOs serve as the grant subrecipient and ultimately have liability for the funds. The CEOs designate a chief lead elected official, or the CLEO, and the CLEO appoints the local workforce development board. The CLEO may designate a fiscal agent who receives those funds at the local level and essentially pays the bills. The local workforce board is the governing body for the local area and sets policy and does strategic planning. And finally, the local board, in conjunction with the chief lead elected official, procures a one-stop operator who is required to coordinate the services of all the one-stop partners and may actually provide services, but does not always in every case. So we just felt it was important, if you didn't already have this information and understanding, to start here before we move farther down the road with the education work that we want to do with all of you and these partners, so that you had this as some foundational knowledge. And if we get to our designated spot to ask questions, please don't hesitate to raise those. All right, now I'd like to spend a little bit of time talking specifically about your board, the State Workforce Development Board. Again, I apologize for some of you, this may be information you have known for a long time, but we do recognize that there may be new folks and there may be folks that could use a refresher, and so we would like to just spend a little bit of time on this as well. So as you know, the state board, the members are appointed by the governor. They come from across the state and they represent various groups that are key to workforce development under WIOA, including business, labor organizations, state agencies that administer the programs, that list of programs I spieled off several minutes ago, chief elected officials, and community-based organizations. Businesses, and this is required by WIOA, must be a majority of state board representatives, and a business representative must serve as the state board chair. And that is because, and I know I said this earlier when we talked about those 3 hallmarks of WIOA, it's because the system is business driven. It has to be, to ensure that the talent pipeline that's developed actually meets the needs of your local key businesses in your high growth sectors. Purpose and the role of the state board? Well, it's to help develop and continuously improve that state workforce system. In your case, Iowa Works. Essentially, the state board, in coordination with the governor, establishes the vision for the full implementation of WIOA in Iowa, and it oversees the local implementation of that vision. The board fulfills its purpose by ensuring that WIOA plans, policies, strategies reflect the vision that you set out, that they embody those hallmarks of excellence, and are designed to meet the talent pipeline, or to build that talent pipeline, that meets the needs of your community. So as we work around the country, we typically find that it's that last purpose, that one about growing your economy and having community prosperity. That's what drives most people to serve on their state and local workforce boards. And I'm imagining that you're probably no different, right? You wanted to ensure that people in your communities and across Iowa have good jobs and economic opportunity, and that businesses have the talent that they need to grow. So let's talk a little bit then about your responsibilities on the state board, because they really do feed in to that vision and that impetus that you probably had when you joined your board. So WIOA assigns important responsibilities to the state board. It's responsible for convening state, regional, and local partners to do, and I know this is quite a long list of things, including enhance the capacity and performance of the system, align and improve program outcomes, promote economic growth, engage businesses and other stakeholders to achieve that WIOA vision, develop, implement, and modify the WIOA state plan. And we'll talk, I know in this list that one sticks out a little bit, right, because it's a very tangible activity. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. Make recommendations to streamline the system, and drive continuous improvement of the system by removing barriers which might impede system alignment and develop strategies which support career pathways. Okay, let's just talk briefly about the WIOA state plan. Because you've already heard us mention several times on this webinar, and I'm sure you hear about it quite a bit, that significant responsibility for the board is the WIOA state plan. The state plan outlines the state board's vision for the workforce development system in Iowa, and it reflects the board's key priorities and identified strategies to achieve the vision. USDOL issues guidance typically in the form of questions or statements that the state responds to create the plan. Those questions are designed to pull out the information DOL needs to both ensure compliance with WIOA, as well as assurance that there's a clear vision and strategy for workforce development in each state, including Iowa. The state board oversees development of the plan. The actual writing is typically done by key partners across state agencies and groups to ensure the content stay true to your vision as the state board. The state board must ultimately approve the plan before it's submitted to the United States Department of Labor. And there are other responsibilities which we will cover more in depth at the upcoming training in September. I'm sorry, October. It's October 4th. All right, so now we want to switch to talk a little bit about the challenge that's going on in Iowa. What I hopefully just did was lay out for you the vision and the expectations and the goals around WIOA. That's the ideal system. And that's what this transformation effort is ultimately driving to, is to help Iowa achieve what we just laid out. So there's work that has to be done for that to happen. And I'm going to turn it over to Stacy O'Keefe now to talk a little bit about the Iowa Challenge.
Thanks, Lynn. Hi, everyone. So I'm hearing a lot of feedback on the phone. Does everybody have their phone?
It looks like everyone has been muted, Stacy. Does that help?
I am still hearing a lot of background noise, but I will, okay, I think it's better now.
Yeah, you sound quite clear to us.
Okay, perfect. So I'm here to share some background in terms of the Employment and Training Administration's oversight of WIOA implementation in Iowa. The outcomes of our oversight really demonstrate the need for this system transformation that we are talking to you all about today. Before I begin, I want to remind everyone of the chart that Lynn shared with all of the many arrows, simply to say that the structure in terms of receipt of the WIOA money, as Lynn said, the governor receives our WIOA and Wagner-Peiser funding. The governor has designated Iowa Workforce Development, IWD, to administer those funds, and the governor has also appointed all of you as the WIOA state board, setting the vision and guiding and leading the implementation of WIOA. So with that structure in mind, IWD is our direct grantee, and our monitoring efforts and corrective actions are directed to the State Workforce Agency, IWD, and this is in every state, not just in Iowa. This is how the process works. So our corrective action is directed to IWD, but this is all based on the premise that the state workforce agency and the state board are working together to address issues and continuously improve the system. So shortly after WIOA passed, probably a year into it, ETA and my team here in the regional office in Chicago began assessing all of our state workforce agencies in terms of WIOA implementation status. And we found that the Iowa system, to be at risk in terms of where it was with implementing the key provisions under the new statute. So state and local boards were not compliant at that time in terms of the required WIOA membership. The partnerships with what WIOA calls the core partners, those were all still sort of under development at the time, and many pieces of the local governance structure were not in place at that time either. And so Iowa was designated to be at risk around implementing the new law. We then followed up with an on-site monitoring in late summer of 2017. And it was really this review that revealed the extent of the non-compliance and began some significant discussion around how to bring the Iowa system into compliance. And the report from that review was issued in November of 2017, and I'm guessing that some, if not many, of you are familiar with this report. It seems to have made its rounds, so to speak. The issues identified in the report were and are systemic in nature, starting at the state level with the workforce agency and the state board, and then moving down into the local system and the local structure. To sort of give you a big picture overview of some of the issues, we found an outdated local area structure that was established under the Job Training Partnership Act. If any of you are as old as I am and have been involved in workforce development, you know that JTPA, predates us by, it goes back prior to WIA. So the structure was established under that old piece of legislation. We saw the result of that outdated local area structure was really that the WIOA funding was being stretched so thin across the 15 local areas that none of the key roles, functions, or structures that are required under WIOA were in place. And since 2017 and that report, there's been much effort put towards figuring out what compliance looks like in Iowa and how does the Iowa system get there? How does the Iowa system get itself into compliance? So the next slide shows the role of the state board. And I'm not going to go into detail because Lynn just covered, you know, a number of the roles and responsibilities of the state board, working with staff support, the functions that are really critical to achieving compliance in Iowa. And the state board, in partnership with IWD, really needs to be setting the stage, creating the vision and the policy framework for making change happen in Iowa. And if you look locally, on the next slide, locally, you know, what does compliance look like in Iowa? And compliance includes having local workforce areas that have adequate funding to ensure that all key roles can be fulfilled while still having adequate funding to ensure that, you know, those folks that are in need of services can receive the services that they need. It also means having active and engaged chief local elected officials who understand their roles and responsibilities under WIOA. And it means that there are fully functioning local boards with highly qualified staff support to enable the board to successfully perform its many important and required functions under WIOA. And with WIOA, this is the first time that we see in statute and regulation state and local boards being explicitly authorized to hire a director and or other staff in order to fulfill and carry out functions and responsibilities. And we actually have statute and regulation around the kinds of qualifications that staff to the board should possess, which really speaks to the significance of the role of the staff to the board. Not just, it's not just locally, it's also at the state board level, but it is at the local level where, you know, the executive director and other staff supporting the board have such a key role. And the last thing I want to say is that, you know, I think that all of this demonstrates the need for the entire system to work together and make the changes and improvements that are needed to create a successful, compliant, and effective WIOA system in Iowa. And with that, I will turn it back to Mayor and Mayor.
Thank you, Stacy. That was helpful. I'm going to talk a little bit now about the benefits of compliance. While Stacy just laid out the changes, the provisions, the structures that need to be in place to be compliant, I want to talk a little bit about the what's in it for Iowa, right, if you move forward with this change. Well, obviously, a clear benefit of compliance is the assurance of ongoing federal funding, and that funding is essential to workforce and economic development, right? It's essential to meeting, to building the talent pipeline and meeting the needs of the businesses and the job seekers in your state. But the benefits go beyond simply sustained resources. It goes to laying a foundation for your system that's designed to achieve those hallmarks of excellence that we already discussed. So by making those changes, Iowa Works will be well positioned to do all of these things here you see on the screen. So promote accountability, transparency, and high quality services. Support the role of the workforce development system as an economic development tool. Aligning programs and services, so you're reducing costs, streamlining service delivery, maximizing those resources, and empowering local boards so that they'll drive a strategic vision for talent development in their communities. We just wanted to share this slide just to try and give you a little bit more information about the how, right? So how does this structure actually do these three things? How do they promote accountability? How do they support using workforce development as an economic development tool? And how does it help align programs and services? So, and there's many different things we could put in each of these columns. This is just kind of a smattering example. But for example, state boards, they will help promote accountability, your state board, by being accountable for establishing and driving that vision that I've talked about and Stacy just mentioned. CEOs will promote accountability. They're accountable for fiscal and administrative integrity. It's a hugely significant role that ensures accountability for federal funding. The second column, using workforce development as an economic development tool. State boards are invested in the effectiveness of the workforce system as a tool. So they really believe and embrace this concept that the workforce system is a tool to drive statewide prosperity. CEOs are invested in the effectiveness of the workforce system as a tool to drive community prosperity. And both the state board and the CEOs ensure alignment of economic development and workforce development. So those entities should be working in tandem, right, with a common goal of community prosperity. The third column, aligning programs and services to reduce duplication and cost. State boards, you're going to focus on alignment and continuous improvement. We already talked about how that is a key underpinning of the state board role. Empower local boards that provide a vision for alignment and integration and then oversee implementation of that vision. So they ensure that the services at the local level are actually designed in a way that promotes alignment and integration. And finally, another example, local boards oversee establishment of an overall budget and funding agreements that distribute operational costs across the partners. And in theory, do that in such a way to reduce duplication and promote collaboration. Okay. That was a lot, and I know there may be some questions. I'm not sure if any questions have come in yet. If you have any at this point, please feel free to type away. Actually, please feel free to type away anytime one might pop up for you. Lori, have we received any questions?
No, ma'am.
Okay. All right, well, I think in the interest of time then, we should go ahead and move forward, but please, as I said, don't hesitate to put questions in the chat box, and we will have a couple of more opportunities to respond to questions before we get to the end of the webinar. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lori, and she is going to talk specifically about the system transformation effort. And Lori, please just let me know when you would like me to advance the slides.
Okay, I will. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the system transformation. I think Lynn has laid a really good groundwork for us, and Stacy provided some great context for what has brought us to where we are right now. So effectively and authentically meeting this challenge of transforming the system will require more than simply reducing the number of local workforce areas or issuing some new policy. The system needs to fully transform to achieve both the vision for economic prosperity for Iowa, as well as meeting the key WIOA principles and provisions that are required by the federal law. So let's move forward now and review the steps for the Iowa workforce system transformation. So what we have here is a graphic that we hope lays out some of the key steps, starting with back in February when you all as the State Workforce Board voted on the recommendations from the Realignment Committee that took the number of local workforce development areas in Iowa from 15 down to 6. So if you look through this slide, moving left to right, it culminates in December 2020 with the certification of local one-stops or the local Iowa Works centers. So this graphic hopefully denotes a few of the key steps along the way. I want to point out one key element that we've not included on this slide, but when you attend the face-to-face training on October 4th, and we're going to tell you a little bit more about that at the end of the webinar today, we will have updated this slide because we want to mention that the one-stop operator, that is the entity that coordinates the local one-stop offices or those local Iowa Works offices, the federal law requires that that one-stop operator be competitively procured. So that is something that the chief elected officials at the local level and the local workforce boards, once they're appointed by those chief elected officials, they will take that on, and that has to be in place. We're projecting that to be in place by December 1st of 2020. And I know that that may seem like it's a long time away, but there's a lot of groundwork that has to be laid at the local level that will begin in the next couple of weeks. So a lot of that groundwork has to be laid so that that procurement process can begin in July of 2020 and then culminate with a one-stop operator designated by December 1st of 2020. So next slide. So the first step in the transformation was was work that was done by this board earlier this year to approve a new configuration, moving again, as we mentioned, from the 15 local workforce areas down to 6 local workforce areas. This change will ensure sufficient resources to support the chief elected officials and the local boards in fulfilling their significant roles under WIOA, while maximizing funding for career counseling, training, and those services that are integral to those job seekers in Iowa, as well as meeting the talent development needs of your employer base in Iowa. Next slide. So this map should look familiar. This is the configuration that you all voted on, and this is the six local areas, the way you all approved it in February of this year. Next slide. So the U.S. Department of Labor, many of you are aware that the U.S. Department of Labor has received 1 or more appeals regarding the process used to identify the new local workforce areas. And as you might expect, there is an established appeal process or protocol to be followed. So per that established federal appeals process, U.S. Department of Labor requested information and documentation from Iowa regarding the process for local consultation that was used to identify the new local workforce areas. Iowa has supplied that information and is awaiting next steps from the U.S. Department of Labor. What is most important to keep in mind is that Iowa must continue to move forward with the realignment during the appeals process. Additionally, your roles and responsibilities as a state board member are the exact same regardless of the number of local workforce areas. Be it 15 or be it 6, the State Workforce Board has the same roles and responsibilities. Therefore, the information you're receiving today, as well as the information you'll receive in the upcoming face-to-face training, which will give you those details by the end of this webinar, that information is all very relevant and pertinent and is not based at all on the number of local areas in Iowa or even what happens with the appeal. So we know that that issue We want to acknowledge that issue. We don't want to shy away from it. We know that that's going on, and that process needs to continue, and we need to allow that process to happen as it needs to happen. But that being said, the work that you all do and the training that's going to take place in October is still the same information, and it's still the same. Your roles and responsibilities are still the same. So next slide. So that was step one. So step two, the second key step in the transformation effort was the development of a framework, or what we like to call a roadmap, which will guide the system through many steps that are required to not just appoint new boards, but to ensure implementation of boards that, to ensure that they're operating in accordance with the WIOA vision, principles, and required provisions. This framework in its complete form is very in-depth, covering over 100 tasks and subtasks to be carried out by various key members of the Iowa system, including this board, including the state partner agencies, chief elected officials, existing and new local workforce boards that will be established. And that work has begun now and will continue to the end of 2020. We'll take a more in-depth look at that framework at the upcoming training. And I know that we keep saying that because we wanted to limit what information we gave you in a webinar environment, so that we can give you the opportunity to digest it and be able to ask questions perhaps more heartily when we're face-to-face with you all next month. But absolutely ask your questions now if you have them. So I think it's important also to point out that as Iowa works forward and moves forward through the system transformation that is going to take place, there are key stakeholders, and it's those groups that we just mentioned. It's the groups that are listed on the screen in front of you. Everybody will be required, will need to flex some muscle and do some things as we move forward with the transformation. So it's not just on the shoulders of the state board, or it's not just on the shoulders of IWD, but it's shared responsibility across the system. So next slide. The third step in implementation of the framework the third step is the implementation of the framework over the next year and a half. Some of the things are currently underway, such as educating stakeholders, including you guys, the chief elected officials, local workforce board members, and others on the value and provisions of WIOA to empower them to fulfill their roles and responsibilities under the law. Another key step, and this is underway, is the establishment of a state-level WIOA core partner working group comprised of representatives from the agencies overseeing key workforce programs. Those agencies include IWD, or Iowa Workforce Development, Iowa Vocational Rehabilitation Services, Iowa Department for the Blind, and Iowa Department of Education. This working group will be charged with collaborating to carry out the vision and strategy established by the governor and you all as the state board, by developing joint policy and an integrated approach for monitoring, program oversight and support, and technical assistance at the local level for local service design and delivery. Another key step in implementation of the framework is, as we just mentioned with that core partner group, is developing and issuing policy and guidance which ensures that the system components are operating in compliance with and in full support of WIOA. Those components include the local workforce boards, any administrative entities that may be attached to the local board, one-stop operators, and other service providers such as community colleges or other service providers. So next slide. So I know that was a lot of information to throw at you. So if there are, Lynn, have there been any, or Rhiannon, have there been any questions that have come through over those last few slides?
No, no questions.
Okay. So we want to look at what all of this means for you all as the state board. We want you all to understand the purpose and the benefit and the key components of the system transformation effort. This, and to understand what it is, you have to understand what it isn't. This wasn't an effort concocted by one agency to close offices. This wasn't something that some folks just decided to do on a whim. This was a response, as you heard from Stacy, to the report issued by the U.S. Department of Labor and the recommendations made by the U.S. Department of Labor and what needed to happen in Iowa to bring the system into compliance. And so we want you all as the State Workforce Board to be versed in that and to be able to respond to inquiries and questions from perhaps chief elected officials or local boards or other key partners of the system, and so that you all are armed with the right information in order to answer those questions. And then also we want you to be a champion for the system. We want you and the transformation efforts. We want you all, by virtue of your positions, your leaders in Iowa and in the Iowa system, the Iowa workforce system, and we want you all to champion those efforts to help build buy-in and support and understanding across the system. All right, and so then just some key things that we want you all to have, and just really hitting these once again, is the reduction in the number of local workforce areas from 15 to 6 was done in order to maximize financial resources available in Iowa and to be able to sustain services to Iowans that are accessing services from this system. We want you all to be able to talk about the local system and how the chief elected officials and the local boards are the ones who oversee and drive that system. And one of the intents of WIOA, one of the intentions of WIOA is that it is locally governed, and so that those folks in those local areas know what needs to happen to meet the needs of their community. And so being a locally driven system is a key foundational principle in WIOA. And then also that just partners at all levels in this system are working together to ensure that there is a customer-driven and integrated system. And with that, we'll go to the next slide, and I'll turn it back over to Lynn.
Okay, thank you, Lori. So I just want to share some additional information about next steps. I think now we've talked about this training throughout throughout this webinar, really hoping that you will be able to come and join us in person. It is definitely much easier to engage that way, more effective, and definitely more fun. And that training is scheduled for October 4th from 12:30 to 3:30 p.m. in Des Moines. And the exact location will be sent out soon. And at that training, we're going to try to do a deep dive into several things. So really, 3 of the 4 things I think we've already presented out. We're going to go deeper. The WIOA vision, principles, and requirements, talk about how the system is structured, who those key players are in those programs that we've really mentioned by name but not described to you yet. We'll talk more in depth about the roles and responsibilities of the state board. And then we'd like to set aside some time to actually talk with you about how to move from a board, that simply might meet the required provisions in the law to one that's really strategic and high impact. So we'll talk about some best practices and strategies around how to do that. So why attend? We are very hopeful that the training is going to provide the information and the tools that you will need. to really use WIOA. We've talked about WIOA, we've talked about the public workforce system as tools for economic development, and workforce development and economic prosperity, all those good things tied into one. And we want to be able to share with you more information about how you can do that. It's also going to include key information that we think will help you as a state board member fulfill your important role to really champion the system transformation effort. The system is really going to need your leadership to do this effectively. We all know change is hard. So we're hopeful that this training will give you the information, the understanding, the talking points you need to help drive that change. I wanted to let you know that coming soon, the Iowa State Workforce Development Board webpage will be set up to serve as a repository of information about the system transformation effort. So the governor's message that we just heard, the recording of this webinar, the other trainings and materials that are developed throughout the transformation are all going to be posted there. So we want that to be kind of your one-stop place to get information. And also, I want you to know that IWD is going to follow up shortly after this webinar. I think I mentioned it before, with the link to that site, and they're going to post new information as it becomes available, and that will include things like webinars, training materials, resources, and updates as they become available. And as I mentioned, I think with that follow-up email will also be this PowerPoint, as well as a link to do a survey monkey evaluation of this webinar. And in that evaluation, we're going to ask you to just let us know about additional training and technical assistance that you feel you might need. So let me move us forward. Okay. This is our last stop for questions. Have any come in via the chat, Lori?
So what we have is we need to make a clarification on the time of the training.
Okay.
So the training is scheduled for October 4th. And Michelle, can you verify the time, the start time?
Yes, it is starting at 9 a.m.
9 a.m. on October 4th. And we will make sure that that accurate information gets to everyone that needs it and is posted in the appropriate places. But Lynn, other than that, no questions have come in.
Okay. Thank you, Lori, and thank you, Michelle. Sorry for that oversight. I think, I'm looking at the time, and we do have some time left. We could go ahead and why don't we unmute the phones? And I know that some folks are more comfortable just, if you have questions, raising them directly over the phone versus typing in a chat box. Certainly not required, but if you do have questions, please feel free to go ahead and do that. Rhiannon, if you want to go ahead and unmute the lines.
And while we're doing that, a question just came through on the chat box, and it says, will you also please post the waivers other states have submitted and are working on? Also, what states have been able to have part or all of their previous systems grandfathered? So we can take a look at how to make available waivers that have been submitted and approved by other states. I'm fairly certain that that is searchable on the U.S. Department of Labor's website. So we'll have to work on the answers to these questions unless somebody else wants to weigh in on that one. What states have been able to have part or all of their previous systems grandfathered in?
So this is Stacy. To the first question, yes, the waivers that have been approved or not nationwide, all that information is on our on the DOL, ETA, WIOA page. And I think Lynn and Mayor, they can certainly provide a link to that, and it's it's updated fairly regularly, so it is not, dated information. And then we'll have to, we'll prepare a response to the question about grandfathering, because it's not, it might be better discussed when you all are in person, because there are so many nuances to the question and what it means in Iowa and in other states.
Great, thank you, Stacy. That's helpful.
And just to add to that, Lynn, I just chatted out the link to the website on the DOL ETA website for the waivers. So it has some information about waivers, and if you scroll down, all of the states and their approved waivers are listed. And then we can put a link directly to that on the State Workforce Development Board website as we make edits and add content. That's not a problem at all. And then I would defer to Stacy to answer the other piece as she just did. So.
Fantastic. Thank you, Michelle. Oh, I know we're getting some feedback here. So are there any other questions that folks want to go ahead and just ask over the phone? No? Okay, that's fine. You can go ahead and save them for the face-to-face training. Actually, I'm going to skip ahead. Although I do actually want to let you know that you can submit questions to this email address, wioagovernance@iwd.iowa.gov. That don't feel like you have to wait until the training. If you want to go ahead and submit a question via email now, you can do that. The IWD team will share those with us as well, I'm sure. And I know also that Michelle did give me approval to share out her contact information if you need to raise a question directly, or if you feel like a conversation would be helpful. Please feel free to reach out to Michelle. Let me go back now to this slide. We just wanted to share out with you some of the key resources that we find really helpful around several areas that we think will be important to you as a state board member. If you could take a look at some of these prior to that in-person training, it would probably help you come armed with lots of great questions for us. Or just whenever you have spare time, if you want to do a little bit more exploration, the first resource is a WIOA overview policy and resources page that's on ETA's site. Has lots of kind of great foundation setting resources. Some that are more around the role of workforce boards and the strategic and high impact nature of boards would be this call to action, and that's on Workforce GPS. There's a strategic boards toolkit on GPS. The National Governors Association has a great resource on building a high performing state workforce board. And then this last resource is a listing of all sorts of different resources just around state and local workforce boards and what you might want to know. So please feel free to go ahead and dig a little bit further. And with that, I think that is all we had for you today, unless I do want to give our partners over at IWD a chance. Is there anything more that you would like to add or share with the group before we wrap up?
No, I don't think so, but thank you so much for doing this for us today.
Absolutely. And I want to say thank you to Stacy and Lori for your help with getting this important information out. And I do want to thank all of you for the important work that you're doing on the State Workforce Development Board. We know it's a volunteer job and we appreciate it and look forward to meeting you in person in October. So with that, thank you and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks.